I'm going to talk a bit about Toolchain and why I think it's production, right? So obviously, as the slide says, we need to have some observability here in our toolchains. So by toolchains, I mean everything that's related to your build, your CI pipelines, your local build systems, DevOps tools, whatever you want to call them, all of those are your toolchain, right? So who here has an application in production, so with some sort of user facing, whether it's internal or external clients, that doesn't have any kind of monitoring? Anybody? I really can't see, but I'm going to pretend. Oh, one person. All right. Nobody else wants to admit to raise their hands, right? Hopefully. Most of you didn't raise your hands because this is expected, right? We expect to have some sort of observability in place for those applications, right? So 20 years ago, some of the applications I worked on, we had some logging, right? And we only knew the applications were down when the customers gave us a call and said, hey, your service is down, what's going on? And we would panic and we would fix it, right? That wasn't acceptable then, and it's definitely not acceptable now. So observability is a non-negotiable requirement when we deploy things. So let's talk about a common scenario, right? So let's say a critical vulnerability was released. Everyone has kind of a way back brain for a few years ago when this happens. But this happens all the time. There's like 50 to 60 vulnerabilities on average released every day. So let's say one was released, it affects your application, and your security team is calling you up and telling you to fix it. Luckily, it's a simple fix. You have to update some dependency, easy peasy. Maybe you even test that locally. It works. So you push it to CI. Awesome. Your CI builds, it runs for a while, and then it fails, right? So what do? You hit the retry button. It's the first thing you do, right? So you wait for another hour. What happens? It fails again. So, okay, now you're going to go look through the logs. You're going to scroll through. Looks like there was some sort of test failure, and you go track down that team that owns the test. And they're like, yeah, we think we've been seeing this issue. We just keep retrying the build, and it eventually works, and it eventually gets merged in. So you babysit the build for another couple hours, and eventually it gets merged in. So this whole time, your application is at risk, right? So I use the example of a flaky test, but it could be anything, right? So it could be a long CI queue. It could be builds that take longer than it could have. The artifact repository could have been down. Integration test infrastructure was down or had an issue. Doesn't matter. We've all faced these kind of issues. But that whole period of time to try to get that thing deployed, your business was at risk. So the tool chain is the path to production, right? You can't get something to production without going through your tool chain. So that means it's a production system. It has users, right? Your users are your developers. Those developers are usually pretty expensive, right? So best case scenario, you're just delaying the company getting revenue, right? They're paying you to build some stuff. That stuff gets deployed and it has some meaningful value to the company. So best case, you're delaying that revenue. Worst case, you're costing dollars, right? So maybe there's something going on your server. I don't know, maybe the CPU, like the code that's deployed causes CPU spikes. Whatever it was, that's causing some sort of issue, and you need to get those things deployed. If your tool chain is down, you can't get it deployed. It's costing the business money. Who remembers this? Right? We've all seen this. It's been a little while, but everyone, yeah, we've all kind of seen this, right? So again, let's say some sort of critical infrastructure was down for your tool chain. Let's continue with saying the CI system is down, right? So now we have idle developers. Okay, maybe they're not idle, but they're not doing what they really should be doing. So you have them doing less critical work, right? So that's a very expensive resource to be doing less critical work, right? There were talks this week about the cost of context switching. That cost just went through the roof because now they go back and forth trying to figure out if their systems are up or down or what's going on. Can I move forward with my PR? Whatever it is, they're context switching and they're burning dollars, right? Again, what happens if you needed to get a patch into the system? Your system, your production system is down. It needs a fix. Well, if your tool chain is also down, you're hosed, right? You can't get it out. I talked about security fixes. Your security guy calls you up and says, hey, I need to get a fix. You can't get that deployed. Your boss is unhappy. Your features are late. Whatever it is, again, you're delaying business for the company. And culturally, there's also a problem here, right? So there's an erosion of trust that happens. If you can't trust your tool chain, then you're probably going to introduce the behavior with your developers where they're going to try to work around problems. And that's going to also increase risk because they might be missing critical steps along the path. So for our production applications, these are the types of things we care about, right? And the same goes true for our tool chains. So let's talk about each one of these. So availability, right? So availability is key. We all know when things break, we see the angry unicorn, but what happens when a service you depend on starts hanging? Response times increase, you start getting 429s or 500s from a service you depend on. Do you notice that, right? Performance, again, this is the second day of the event. If you don't think fast feedback loops are important by now, anything I say in this next 10 minutes or so is not going to change your mind, but it's important. Scalability, most of us are now building in the cloud. If we're not, we have infrastructure provisioned. We still need to keep an eye on CI queues and those types of things. So we really need to focus on scalability, and that could be cost or whatever your metric is. And then, of course, there's reliability. So I just talked about how a flaky system, whether it's test or something else, erodes trust, right? That may lead to bypassing some sort of critical process that you have put in place. And that's not a malicious intent, right? People need to get their jobs done. They're trying to just, get their jobs done with minimal effort here. But there are also security issues, right? So, in the previous case, there wasn't a malicious actor, but with security issues, there could be, okay? So supply chain attacks are on the rise, right? It's an easy target. Your CI system is literally a remote execution engine, right? And this is an easy target. So we really need to be paying attention to these things. So when something does happen, we need the same type of observability data that we would for our production systems, right? And you want to triage the event, figure out what the impact was. If this was a customer-facing app, you'd set up a war room if any of these things happened, right? You'd get that fixed, you'd get a team assigned, you'd be on it. We need to treat our tool chain the same way. All right, these are the 3 pillars of observability. We've all seen these? Raise your hands, yeah? Pretty much everybody. Okay, so let's talk about these in the context of our tool chain. So first up is the easy one. Everybody has logs, right? But it's probably logs for your CI system, right? So you have logs and you probably think you're done. But what about local developer? Who has local developer logs? Aggregate a few of us. Awesome. Okay. So what if 10% of your developers are having some sort of issue, right? They're complaining about random build failures. What do? What if your CI builds? What if your IDEs are hanging, right? Do you have the data you need to fix that? Can you troubleshoot those issues, right? Without this extra kind of observability data from local builds, we can't, right? So, we're sort of doing okay here. Some of us have local builds. Most of us have CI logs. But even the retention rate on your CI logs might not be enough. So we could do a better job here. So metrics, right? So most places will know give a rough estimate of how long their build is, right? So who has a build that's over an hour? Yeah, handful, lots of folks, right? So they're like, yeah, it's about an hour, right? That's kind of the back of the envelope thing. And unless you're really tracking these things, you don't know specifically how long. It's just kind of this gut feel. It's too long, right? But we need to do something about this. We need to figure out where the bottlenecks are, right? What's wrong with the build? Is there a CPU bottleneck? Is it whatever the issue is, right? How long does it take for your build to fail usually? So if you have an hour-long build and it takes 55 minutes to fail because a really simple check that could have been done early on, that's a problem, right? So the faster the failure, the better. But obviously, if you have an hour-long build, that's a problem. So again, are things trending in the right directions? So we have metrics, but is your build reliability going up or is it going down? Is it staying the same? What are we seeing here? Anybody tracking DORA metrics as it relates to your tool chains? Nobody. Maybe there's people, I don't know, there's bright lights here. So this is another thing. So if you want to increase your rate to get things deployed, your tool chain is the bottleneck. So traces. Traces is another fun one. Let's think about all the components needed for a simple CI build, right? So source control, CI server. CI server has agents. There's also artifact repositories, build tools. I'm a Java guy, so I'm going to need JVM installed and a handful of other things. And I haven't even touched things like authentication and all these other requirements that we have, right? Can you trace an artifact that was built in your system, right, all the way back to the source? So you have something deployed now. Can you trace it back to the build agent it was deployed on? Most of us probably cannot do this, right? So if there was an issue on one of those build agents that poisoned the artifacts that was created, could you figure out what things you have in production that are causing a problem? So we really need to understand the chain of custody of how a change really flows through the system in order to do this. Anybody here in a well-regulated environment, you may have audit requirements that you have to produce. So you need that data to produce those reports. But even if you're not, you still need the data to troubleshoot the system when it's broken. All right, who has heard of Temple? Fewer people? Just one in the front here? Oh, a couple of people. Awesome. All right, so basically Temple is you take those previous three ideas, those 3 pillars, and you add 3 more to it, and you mix up the letters until it spells something useful, and then you have Temple, right? Which is cool because pillars and Temple, right? It goes really well. All right, so here's the other 3. So exceptions, profiles, and events. I'll go through these really quick here. So exceptions, we all see exceptions when our builds fail or pipelines fail. So we've got that one down, right? But it's a lot easier to troubleshoot a problem when you have an exception. You know exactly where the problem happened. Profiles, right? Many of us are thinking about profiles in the way of like we're profiling an application to do some maybe performance tuning. But something in your pipeline is probably slow. You probably like, oh, my tests are 90% of my builds. That's where it's slow. But that's not the whole story, right? There's time spent downloading dependencies. Maybe your compiler is slow. Whatever it is, there's a bunch of other things in your build that you need to be concerned about. And events, the last one is interesting. There are significant occurrences that something happened in your pipeline. Right? A security scanner ran, an artifact was created, that artifact was pushed to an artifact repository. Whatever they are, those are significant events that we need to track. So observability powers everything we do in Develocity. Without it, we wouldn't be able to do any of these things, right? So yesterday, I gave a talk about flaky tests, flaky test detection and tracking. Again, that's all based on observability data, right? I know there was others that talked about build acceleration, and there was talks about troubleshooting. All of those, again, you need data, right? This same observability data can help your security posture too, right? So my shirt, something security. It's usually afterthought, right? There's a to-do. We'll do something with security. Now, in this context, maybe it's not really security. It's my policies, my continuous GRC, right? So governance, risk management, and compliance. None of this stuff should be an afterthought. This should be something we do as part of our builds. So this is a screenshot from the Develocity Provenance Governor. All right, this is our new product on continuous GRC. So we can create signed attestations based on your built artifacts, which allow you to do policy evaluation later on in your pipelines. Right, so this is a simple example. It shows this project didn't pass our policies, right? So it needed to be built with a specific JVM. Again, I'm a Java guy. The artifacts needed to be downloaded from only our internal repository, not external, right? That's a big deal if I want to do some sort of curation. And then I also potentially want to block specific dependencies. Maybe I don't want to allow Lombok in my application, for example. All right, so of course there are a handful of other benefits. I'm going to lump these into 2 groups, right? So for engineers in the room, right, we can make improvements based on data. Right? We need data to make improvements. If your build is slow, we need to figure out why it's slow, right? We also need to prove that you actually made a change that helped the situation. You can't just say, it feels faster, right? That's not valid. So you need data of the before and after state. Troubleshooting is a critical part of our jobs. It's not going away, but we have more code flowing into the world. So troubleshooting is going to be harder. We need to tackle this better and more efficiently. So you need that data. In general, a better developer experience, right? So hopefully a better developer experience is going to make you less frustrated. So you're going to want to stick around your job, but it's also going to make you more productive. For managers, we have a well-observed tool chain is going to make your team more efficient, right? And of course, that's going to impact your bottom line. So it's going to lower your risk, your business risk, and simplifies governance. Any data you need for audits or those types of things can easily be automated, pulled from the system. But in general, you have improved decision-making, right? Which projects need the most help? I like to pick on that hour-long build, right? But let's say I have an hour-long build, but that project only builds infrequently. We update the dependencies, I don't know, quarterly. That's not great, but let's say we do that. So that thing doesn't build very often, and it's pretty stable. I have another project that takes, let's say, half the time to build, but it's changing all the time. The CI builds are flaky. So which of those two projects would I use? Which of those two projects should I invest in? I probably want to invest in the application that's getting more frequent updates, right? So it's not just the build time. There's other factors that need to go in. So I need data to help me make those decisions. All right. So your tool chain isn't just a collection of scripts and servers. It's a critical production system. It needs the same attention and rigor as your production applications, right? So where do we start? You know, this is a don't boil the ocean thing. There's lots of different ways you could solve this problem, but you need to find out where the pain points are today and figure out where you need to go to fix those problems. What data do you need? How often do those problems show up, right? So start there. So I would say an observable system isn't a luxury. It's a requirement if you want to efficiently and reliably deliver software. All right, so there's no time for questions because this is a lightning talk, but I will be at the happy hour, so come find me. And thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.